Coming up, Egor Demin exceeds expectations during his NBA debut. I'll tell you why his performance quelled concerns about his outlook and where he must improve right now.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. On today's show, I'm going to be breaking down Egor Demin's long-awaited NBA debut. I'll outline the positives, negatives, and what fans should be looking out for moving forward. But Egor obviously made his NBA debut on Friday during the Nets preseason finale in Toronto. He was sidelined by that plantar fascia tear for a lot of the offseason and the beginning of training camp in the Nets' first three preseason games. But he plays in this game, and I think that he exceeded expectations by all accounts. And one major concern about Egor's profile entering the NBA draft was his ball handling, how he was going to be able to handle pressure. Was he going to be able to handle, initiating offense against NBA-level defenses? And this is only one game. It's nothing to, draw grand conclusions about. But in my opinion, he eased some concerns in that area with what he was able to do against the Toronto Raptors, which is one of the longest and most aggressive defenses in the NBA. That defense was ranked high in the NBA up until they started tanking at, midway through in the very end of that season last year. So encouraging stuff from Egor there, but getting to the stats, played 19 minutes in this one, came off the bench, had 14 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist, 3 of 5 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3, and 6 of 7 from the free throw line. But the major positive that I took away with this was just his ability to handle pressure, because we saw it early in this game. Ben Serap and Nolan Troy both played early, and the Raptors were really pressing up, pressuring, 3/4 of the court and really getting into these guys as ball handler and testing them. And that's obviously a question for all of these guys as ball handlers. Are they going to be able to hold up against that? And that was Egor's, one of his weaknesses in college was you hear a lot of college coaches talk about it. You hear scouts talk about it with Egor, and the book was kind of out on him midway through last season of college coaches and defensive coordinators saying, get up into this guy, pressure this guy, make this guy uncomfortable with his handle. He's 6'9". The ball gets a little bit higher in the handle. Obviously, it's not the tightest. He's not the twitchiest or most explosive. And I think all of those things are still true, and they remain concerns. But in this game against Scotty Barnes, against Abaji, against Grady Dick, against these other guys who were pressuring Egor, he was able to initiate offense comfortably. And that was, a stark contrast to what we saw from Ben Serap and Nolan Troy, and I'll talk about them later. But that ability to do that was really nice to see, because in Summer League, at BYU and at Summer League, it was something that he wasn't necessarily able to do all the time. Like, we saw him playing off the ball a lot at Summer League, wasn't initiating a ton of offense, and part of that was him playing extended stretches alongside Ben Serap or Nolan Troy, but it was also his inability to hold guys off, the handle being loose, his lack of strength in his frame. And I think all of those things remain concerns. But at least for this game against this Raptors defense, Egor looked like the most comfortable and capable, ball handler of this rookie trio by far. So that was a resounding positive in my opinion. Also, the three-point shooting, looked confident, knocked down 2 of 3 looks in 19 minutes. So if you get up to 30 minutes, obviously those attempts, you want them a little bit higher, but it was a positive to see the confidence level carry over from Summer League to this NBA debut. We had one look where he was handling in the pick and roll, got a high ball screen. The defender went under the screen. He stopped, popped, knocked down a 3. We saw him do that in Summer League. We also saw him hit a catch and shoot 3 from the corner. We saw him get fouled on 1 3-point attempt. We saw him miss a pretty, audacious catch and shoot attempt on the wing where he was tightly covered. But I think that all of that just speaks to the confidence. We saw Egor, he shot 27% from 3 at BYU, albeit on extremely high volume, and he was dealing with a shoulder injury for much of the season. But that was a major concern entering the draft, because with the shot creation limitations, with the ball handling limitations, with his, some of the things that he wasn't able to do in terms of getting downhill and being a guy who could drive offense and create his own shot, if the three-point shooting also wasn't there, that further limits what you can do on the ball, and it also greatly limits what you can do sliding to the wing and being an off-ball player. And then at Summer League, He shoots 43% on around 7.7 3-point attempts per game, and this is only one game here, but he looked just as confident and the stroke looked just as pure, and he was 2 of 3 from 3 in this one. And that's all we heard this offseason about Egor, was him shooting at an extremely high level in all of his pro day workouts, in his workouts with the Nets privately. Like, that was a major red flag. A lot of people were concerned about that, and every person I talked to in and around the Nets organization, including Sean Marks, including Jordi Fernandez, including other front office people, whenever I've asked them about it, they've said, this guy is a shooter. Like, this guy is a sharp shooter. He's going to knock down shots, and we have zero doubt about that. So that confidence level that I've heard from everybody in and around the Nets organization, I think it speaks volumes, and I think that Egor has backed up their assessments at Summer League and now in this first preseason game, albeit on small volume. I think the confidence was pretty evident. And despite all these positives, there are definitely still improvement areas. This is Egor's NBA debut, but while he was comfortable initiating offense and doing some of those things, the limitations as a ball handler, the limitations as a shot creator, some of those things are still evident. Like I said, that he looked comfortable, handling the ball, handling pressure and things along those lines. But that's really where it stopped. In terms of being an advantage creator, that really wasn't there in this game, as it wasn't there at Summer League when he's taking a step up, obviously, in NBA level competition or defensive competition that he faced in Las Vegas and now against Toronto. The ball handling, you look at his shot profile, he attempted only 2 shots inside the arc in this game. One of those was off the backdoor cut. One of them was a drive to the rim where he kind of smoked the layup, but he only touched the paint, I'd say, twice off the dribble in this game from what I saw. And, that speaks obviously to his inability to create advantages, his lack of shake, his inability to kind of comfortably handle and turn the corner on some of these pick and rolls, because the biggest strength that Egor had at BYU was his pick and roll playmaking and doing some of those things. And we saw at Summer League that was kind of neutralized by the ball handling struggles that he had. And in this game, while he didn't get ripped a ton, he had 2 turnovers. He didn't necessarily, he wasn't embarrassed the way some of these other Nets rookie ball handlers was. Getting into the pick and roll and getting downhill, whether by himself or via a ball screen, that really wasn't a thing. As I said, only touched the paint twice off the dribble in this game. One of those, he did have a really sweet pass. He drove to his right and threw an over-the-head hook pass across 3 defenders, kind of read one of the low mans rotating too hard on the weak side and hit Michael Porter Jr. in the corner for an open 3. It would have been a sweet highlight if MPJ hit it, but that was just a glimpse at that playmaking brilliance that we've seen throughout his BYU tape. And you look at it, that playmaking ability, his inability to get downhill has really limited that playmaking ability. You look at, 3 Summer League performances, this 1 preseason game, he only has 5 assists through those 4 appearances with the Nets, 3 Summer League, 1 preseason. And that is, for a guy who was regarded as the best passer in this year's draft, that's not what you would expect. And I think some of that is obviously, or a lot of it, almost all of it, is a product of his inability to touch the paint and get downhill. When you look at a guy like Ben Saraf or Nolan Traore, Saraf has that shake, he has that craftiness. Traore obviously has that elite first step to turn the corner on screens or just blow by people. Egor doesn't necessarily have that right now. He doesn't have the tightest handle or the shake, and he doesn't have that elite first step. Well, I feel like if he has a lane, he can get downhill and get to the rim. We saw it on the one layup that he smoked. He has that stride length, but the other things aren't really there right now, and that's going to need to improve. And a lot of that is going to be added strength. We talked to Steve Hetzel at Summer League. I've talked to other people since then, and they've said that adding strength to his frame and adding strength to his profile is going to be the biggest thing in terms of being able to hold off defenders at the point of attack, and also being able to get downhill and create advantages using some of that size, at a greater level. So those are going to be things to watch out for Egor. But there also were some pretty impressive positives, in my opinion, on the defensive end of the floor. So I'll get into those and tell you why fans should be encouraged about what Egor can be as a two-way player when I continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Built. Guys, nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where Built comes in. Built is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards you can actually use. When you pay rent through Built, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed towards hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. But Built isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. Guys, I love that with Built. Your rent finally works for you. You're earning points every month on something that you already have to pay. Whether I'm grabbing food at my favorite local restaurant or heading to the gym, I'm still earning rewards. And Built has made my everyday life feel more rewarding, from my neighborhood to my travel plans. So turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNBA. Make sure to use that link so they know that we sent you. When I found out that Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try. And let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear, fit, comfort, or just finding the right style for me. Skims changed all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with perfect balance of comfort and style. Guys, I tried the Skims 5-inch boxer brief, and I'm hooked. These are perfect for my active lifestyle. They move with me, never lose their shape, and stay in place all day. Whether I'm working out or just running errands, they're the most comfortable and reliable underwear I've ever owned. Plus, the lightweight material feels amazing, almost like you're wearing nothing at all. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select my show in the drop-down menu that follows. Coming back from the break, continuing today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Egor Demin's impressive NBA debut. And a lot of what he did was impressive on the offensive end of the floor. We saw some highlights in that end, the shooting, a few nice passes, a nice backdoor cut for a layup. But I thought that the defense was a really positive takeaway that I saw from what Egor put on tape in this game. And I feel like this has been a slept-on part of Egor's game, because when you take a ball handler in the draft who's 6'9", 6'10" wingspan, obviously has that length, that is going to play a lot of time on the defensive end. I think the conversation surrounding Egor entering the draft in terms of his defense, a lot of it was like he can be a wash defensively. We're not sure about the potential that he has there, but I'm pretty encouraged, and I have, some hope or some, feelings that Egor can be a plus defender and will be a plus defender at the next level. Like, you look at what we saw from Egor in this game. He just has an understanding of defensive positioning and an understanding of how to use his length and his frame. And I think all of those things together, when you pair that with the motor that he clearly has and the want-to that he clearly has, it's stuff that we saw at Summer League. And I thought that it played in this game, and I think it's going to continue to play at the NBA level. Like, you look at some of the plays that Egor made defensively in this game. Were they any crazy highlights? Were they anything that necessarily people would see unless somebody pointed them out? Maybe not, but I think that they were positives. Like, you had one play in this game where I think it was Emmanuel quickly kind of drove left. He had a pick and roll with Jakob Poeltl, and he hit Poeltl on the roll, and Egor's on the weak side. And as Poeltl catches it on the roll, he digs down, gets a swipe, hits the ball. It goes off Poeltl's knee, and it goes out of bounds. And that's just an example of the length that he has, really constricting some of the lanes. And that's why the Nets were attracted to a player with Egor's profile. Like, we talked to Sean Marks after the draft, and he said one of the things that he pointed to with all of these picks that he made was 0.5-second basketball, pass first, unselfish, ball not sticking. But then defensively, he said sizable, multi-positional guys who can make things difficult on defense. And that is a big part of the vision that the Nets are trying to implement. And Egor fits that very well with that 6'9" frame, that 6'10" wingspan, and his understanding of defensive principles and defensive positioning. And that understanding of those defensive rotations and principles is really important in this Jordi Fernandez scheme, because the Nets are doing a lot less switching in this scheme. That was something that they did in the past, but now they're doing a lot more blitzing on ball screens. They play a little bit of drop, but I think it was in ESPN's power rankings. It was Zach Kramer, one of the ESPN guys, had the stats. So the Nets blitzed on 14% of their ball screens last year. And that involves, obviously, a lot of rotating on the backside and a lot of movement, and all of these players being on a string and rotating together. I think that 14% blitzing, that was the highest in the NBA last season. I think that was the highest since the Miami Heat in 2020-21. So that really gives you a sense of what Jordi Fernandez is trying to do. It's a very involved defensive scheme with a lot of rotations. We've heard some of the Nets players, Cam Thomas and a few other guys, talk about the challenges that can present in having length, having range, being able to cover ground, constrict passing lanes, constrict driving lanes. All of that is extremely important. And most importantly, the IQ and the knowledge of how to do some of those things and understanding it and the want to. Egor Demin has all of those. In addition to that play I talked about, he had two more plays back-to-back involving Poeltl, one where it was another pick and roll between Emmanuel Quickly and Jakob Poeltl, and Quickly hit Poeltl with a nice bounce pass, and Egor rotates over this low man. He stays vertical. He has that huge standing reach, and he keeps his arms up straight, and he forces Poeltl into a miss at the rim. Same thing on the very next possession. Poeltl catches the ball in a roll. Egor rotates over as the low man. Verticality, forces a miss. That's forcing a 7-footer in Jakob Poeltl, who's not like an explosive dunker or anything, but a good player and a good finisher, forcing him into back-to-back misses. And I just think that those 3 plays were examples of Yegor's understanding of defensive rotations, and also his understanding and also his ability to use that length in his frame to make things tough for the opposition offensively. So I think that all of those things are encouraging, and that's why, you go with a player like Egor Demin, you have some of those traits to fall back on. Like, the word entering the draft was that the Nets liked Jeremiah Fears, and I don't think that was off base. I think that the Nets did like Jeremiah Fears. Would they have taken him over Egor Demin if he got to the 8th pick? Who knows? We won't know, because I don't think the Nets will ever let that information out at this point. But these are some of the positives of Egor Demin over a player like Jeremiah Fears. These plays that he can make using his length, using his frame, what he can be, the upside and the potential defensively, you get that stuff. You have those traits to fall back on. Whereas if, Egor, it looks like he's going to be a good 3-point shooter, but if he's just like an average 3-point shooter and some of his offense is limited by that, you do have the potential for two-way impact and stuff on the other end of the floor that does make you a little bit confident in what his floor could potentially be, as opposed to a guy like Jeremiah Fears, who in the playoffs we see some of these smaller guards, they just get hunted mercilessly on the other end. Like, we've seen it from Trae Young. We're seeing it now with Jalen Brunson on the Knicks. Those guys, NBA teams are going to take advantage of those mismatches whenever they can by putting those guys in actions on and off the ball. And I think with Egor, even if he doesn't end up being like a plus defender, I think he has a really good chance to be a good defender, or at least a wash where he's not going to be able to be hunted and it's not going to be a clear mismatch on the floor at all times. And in this current modern NBA, I think that is a resounding positive and something that should definitely not be overlooked by fans when you're talking about Yegor's profile overall. But we had some other takeaways involving the Nets' other rookies, also involving Michael Porter Jr., Zaire Williams, the Nets' rotation overall. So get into all that when I close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. I said yes to making the switch and getting premium wireless for just $15 a month. Mint makes it simple. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can even bring your own phone and keep your same numbers and contracts. Guys, I love that you're getting the same quality of service with Mint that you had before, but for a fraction of the price. The setup is easy. You kept your number, and then you're running in minutes. Guys, ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 per month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 GB on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Brooklyn's preseason finale hit on Egor Demin, and now going to offer some other takeaways that I had from this game. I think the first takeaway outside of Egor Demin was the struggles of these other Nets rookies in rookie point guards in Ben Surratt and Nolan Troy. And man, it was ugly. Like, fans who had concerns about a repeat of last season where the Nets held on to some of these veterans. Like, then they had Cam Johnson, Dennis Schroeder, Dorian Finney-Smith. Now you got Michael Porter Jr., Cam Thomas, Terrence Mann, some of these other guys. They had concerns. Some fans have concerns about the Nets having another hot start, them winning some more games than they should. And that's still possible, but I'd say it's unlikely. And the biggest reason that I've been harping on is having these rookie ball handlers and their inability to handle ball pressure and handle some of the things that you need to as an NBA point guard. And in this game, Egor Demin did a good job of handling it, but Ben and Nolan, it was pretty disastrous. Like, just turnovers all over the place. I think obviously Nolan was worse than Ben. Like, we saw Ben have some struggles initiating the offense, but a lot of his turnovers were in the half court, trying to get downhill and make some plays. He played 22 minutes. Nolan was in for 6 minutes and just got ripped in the backcourt a couple of times and was really just having struggles even getting the ball across half court. And I think that speaks to what we've been saying about the dynamic between Ben and Nolan this preseason. Like, Ben didn't look good in this game by any stretch of the imagination, but he did have 5 assists. He played more than Nolan. I think he looked more confident than him as a ball handler, although it still was bad. And that has been the case throughout this preseason. Nolan has just looked like he is very far away from being able to compete at an NBA level. And that is part of it is just the frame, the handle, the decision-making, all of those things, the ability to play with pace and some of that craft. But in this game, I would say it was just mostly the frame. Like, he just looked like he was getting overwhelmed by these Raptors defenders in the backcourt and at the point of attack. The handle didn't look tight. And then he just, he didn't look like he could handle it from a physicality perspective. And that has been the case throughout the preseason, against those two Suns matchups. But this game taking a step up in terms of the defensive pressure against the Raptors, it was really exposed there. And it's a reason why I think Egor, if he's full strength, we'll see if he starts on Wednesday, but he's going to be the starter for this team pretty soon. And then Ben will be the backup. And I expect Nolan fully to spend time in the G League. And I think that will be really good for him as he tries to get more comfortable doing some of these things, handling pressure, adding strength to his frame, and also, playing with some of the craft that he hasn't necessarily shown thus far. All of that is going to be really important for him. So the turnovers, I expect Egor, he didn't in this game. And I said that the way that he handled ball pressure was a positive. And I think that he looks better in that regard than Ben and Nolan. He's still going to turn the ball over a lot. He's going to have the ball in his hands so much as a rookie. He's going to turn the ball over. Ben and Nolan, if Nolan gets called up, they're going to turn the ball over. This Nets offense, there will be fun and encouraging moments, but there's going to be a lot of turnovers, and that's going to lend itself to a lot more losing than last season when you had a guy like Dennis Schroeder handling the point early in the year or D'Angelo Russell late in the year. That transition from those guys to these Nets rookies, it's already starting to show, and it will continue to show throughout the campaign. It's a big reason why I think the Nets are going to win a decent amount less than they did last season. But continuing on through some takeaways from this preseason finale, Michael Porter Jr., 34 points in this game, offensively just looked locked in, and a shot making, put on a shot making clinic in this game. And you saw some of the things that MPJ is going to be able to do. He just doesn't need that much space to get some of these shots off. And I think that that's going to be really important for these rookie point guards. I just talked about their struggles. MPJ is going to be, Cam Thomas will be also in a sense of him being a good shot creator, but MPJ is going to be the safety blanket for these Nets rookies because he's a guy that is a huge target on the perimeter and can get his shot off quickly and efficiently. So the spot-up shooting is going to be an asset alongside these Nets rookies. And then also just cuts to the rim. I mean, I don't think that MPJ is going to have the ball in his hands in terms of handling the ball off the bounce as much as Cam Johnson did last season. I think Jordy will utilize him more off the ball. But on cuts to the rim, he's a huge target. Like, he's 6'10". He's a big, bulky guy. Like, that is going to be a big target and something that these Nets rookies can look to on the perimeter or on cuts to the basket, which is going to be big for them. But the MPJ offense, I think there's going to be nights like this throughout the year. There's going to be nights where he goes off for 34 points like he did. He's going to put on a shot-making display. There's going to be nights where it might look ugly as he tries to transition into greater offensive responsibilities as well. So that's what to look out for on offense. Defensively, as good as it looked on offense for MPJ, the defense just hasn't been there throughout the preseason. The effort hasn't been there. I talked about this on yesterday's podcast. We'll see. Like, he's going to be in this rotation as a starter and a core featured piece regardless, because the Nets just don't have any other shot makers of this level. But the defensive want to has not been there. That was a question in Denver. His want to as a defender, as a rebounder, that not being always consistent. And that hasn't been there this preseason. Give him the benefit of the doubt. We'll see as we move into the regular season. But it was a pretty stark contrast to his engagement on offense versus defense throughout this preseason. But we'll see if that changes. And if it doesn't, I'll point it out and let you guys know. Next takeaway, Zaire Williams looked really good in this game and has really looked really good throughout this preseason, particularly these last two preseason games. Zaire was, I think, averaged around 18 points per game these last two preseason games, 13 of 22 from the field, 8 of 14 from three, and just carrying over that shooting improvement that we saw last season. Like, it was nothing at an elite level in terms of the shot making, the three-point shooting from Zaire last year, but it was a clear step up in terms of efficiency on career high volume that we saw from Zaire. And he's carried that over to this preseason. It's just looked really confident, getting a shot off quick, getting a shot off efficiently. The stroke looks smooth. These makes that he has are just hitting nothing but net. So good to see from Zaire Williams, a guy who is going to have a rotation role from day one as a backup on the wing, and we'll see if he can build upon what he did last season, and if he can continue to improve these next 2 years and get another contract extension and be a long-term piece for this Nets team, which is looking like a real possibility. Last thing I just want to close it out on is, the Nets answering some rotation questions, I think, in this game. And I touched on this briefly on yesterday's pod, but you look at the way that they held this rotation, it was Egor Demin and Ben Stroff at point guard. Nolan Troy obviously struggled, but there were 3 Nets rookies who I've said continuously I expect to spend time in the G League early in the year based on things I've seen and heard from in and around the Nets organization. And those were Nolan Troy, Drake Powell, and Danny Wolf. Nolan played 6 minutes in this game. Drake played 2 minutes in this game. Danny Wolf did not play in this game, and I would expect all of those guys to be in the G League early in the year. And then as the season progresses, there's going to be injuries. We'll see if some of these veterans get traded, and they're going to get called up. But early in the year, I think this was Jordi Fernandez trying to show this rotation a little bit and test it out for what it's going to be, as we see a lot of NBA teams do in this final preseason game. And he showed it. And those rookies, I think, outside of Egor Demin and Ben Stroff, going to spend time in the G League. Also, Tyrese Martin played 11 minutes in this game. Obviously not a lot, but he did have a role, and I expect him from day one probably to be the backup to Cam Thomas at that shooting guard spot. So I think Tyrese Martin earned that roster spot. He had a rotation role throughout the preseason within that second unit, and I expect that to continue to be the case into the regular season. If he can take advantage of that, he's a guy who could get a contract extension that for him is his first significant standard contract extension. So that's something to watch out for throughout the beginning of this season. But that's all we have for today's Locked On Nets episode. We got the Nets regular season opener. It's finally here tomorrow. So I'll have coverage of all that. But if you guys do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy the content, take 1 second right now. Smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. But I'm going to have more talk about what I hear in Nets practice tomorrow and into the Nets regular season opener when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.